After decades of living under our HOA's iron fist, they finally went too far by increasing my fees for having too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't realize was I'd been secretly buying up the neighborhood homes for years. And now it was time to demonstrate Karen, our power-hungry HOA president, who actually owned this neighborhood. But would she graciously accept defeat when I unveil my secret welcome to my channel, please? Subscribe if you like more Karen and HOA stories I never wanted to have trouble with our HOA I didn't, but when I discovered that bright orange notice plastered on my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this wore my hands shaking. As I read it, immediate whole fee raised $500 a month violation, excessive cars on property, 3 cars. That's what this was about. My work truck that I depend on for my construction business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shift, and the used Honda we purchased for our daughter's 16th birthday last month. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. I stood there watching through my kitchen window as our HOA president Karen Mitchell did her morning walk inspection with her diminutive pink clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and began snapping photos again. 3rd time this week, honey, she's at again. My wife, Sarah, called from the living room. Perhaps we should just put the Honda in the garage. No, I said adamantly, adding coffee. We're not sneaking our daughter's car around like we're criminals. The garage is full of Sarah's medical equipment and my work gear, exactly like we discussed at the previous H meeting. That meeting, I couldn't help but think about how Karen had snickered when I was trying to justify our case rules. Our rules, Mr. Thompson, she'd said, without even glancing up from her phone. Maybe if you can't pay for proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you. What Karen didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that I'd been steadily purchasing properties in our complex for the previous 5 years under my real estate investment company. Every time a house came on the market, I insisted on using alternative LLC names to buy, since it began as a shrewd investment tactic. But now it was something else. I strolled outside to retrieve the mail, making a conscious point of slowing down. Karen feigned examining Mrs. Johnson's roses bushes, keeping an eye on me out of the corner of her eye. Poor Mrs. Johnson had been cited last month for roses that were too brightly colored and disturbing neighborhood color harmony. My phone vibrated. A text from my attorney. Property closing is complete. You now own 67% of development. I smiled, hiding the phone away as Karen strode up to me, her clipboard held tightly in front of her. Mr. Thompson, she called out, her voice cloyingly sweet. I hope you got our notice regarding the vehicle infraction. I did, Karen, and I have a few questions regarding the legal grounds for this fee hike. I kept my tone steady and professional. She waved her hand dismissively. The board has complete authority to adopt fees as necessary. Perhaps if you came to more meetings, you'd know how these things function. Her smile didn't come near her eyes. Little did she realize I'd gone to every one of the last 5 years meetings by proxy representatives who owned the other houses. I'd sat back and chronicled every one of Karen's selective enforcements, every dubious fee, every power abuse. As she turned to leave, designer heels clicking on the sidewalk, called over her shoulder, "Oh, and the board is having an emergency meeting tonight, 7 p.m. sharp. We'd be talking more about problem properties." I saw her head off and took out my phone again to text my attorney. Time to make those papers. We talk about Karen making her move this evening. My daughter's vehicle arrived in the driveway just then, and I saw Karen pause to snap more pictures. My blood surged, but I remained calm. Tonight would turn the whole neighborhood around. But first I had to make some calls. I went inside and unfolded the maps of properties on my desk, each parcel meticulously highlighted and coded. 5 years of careful planning, of building evidence, of seeing Karen's HOA terror reign. Getting worse tonight. She would realize that her largest error was not only persecuting my family, but also underestimating exactly whom she was messing with. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson on the other side of the street, sobbing over another notice of violation. As I heard her tale, I looked at the framed picture on my wall. My father proudly in front of his initial house prior to an HOA's harassment having led him to sell at a loss 20 years ago. My dad had shown me how to play the long game, to win smart, not angry. I glanced at my watch. 6 hours to the meeting. Karen wanted to play hardball over a few cars in the driveway. She had no idea what hit her. I entered the meeting room of the community center and immediately sensed attention. Every chair was taken up by neighbors I'd known for years, sitting shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves. Karen had really done it this time. She'd even brought in a professional photographer to photograph my driveway at various angles so that 3 regular-sized cars would appear to be some sort of illicit parking lot. Let's get started, Karen declared, banging her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She'd sent out the call for this emergency meeting on a Tuesday night, knowing perfectly well that many working families would find it hard come, but I'd made sure I was there sitting silently in the back row observing her performing. Her usual act, as you can see from these professional photos. She started working her way through her PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Thompson's house is now a used car lot. A few gasps escaped from her devoted followers. In the front row, the same people whose Christmas decorations remained up until March without penalty. I looked around the room, observing how Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd gotten fined last month for having her grandson's car parked in her driveway while he assisted with repairing her roof. Mr. Chin, the science teacher at the high school, was angrily taking notes. He'd gotten a violation notice for parking his car over his own driveway line from the most recent snowstorm. Karen moved on to the next slide, a zoomed-in picture of my daughter's car. This car here has been parked in the same location for more than 48 hours. She didn't say it was because my daughter was visiting home from college for the weekend. The rest of the meeting drug on as Karen showed her evidence charts of alleged property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, most likely her friends, and even weather reports indicating my cars were producing too much snowdrifts on the road. In addition, she went on to extract a large binder. I've recorded all movement of cars in and out of Mr. Thompson's residence for the last 3 months. My eyebrows shot up. She had been monitoring my family's movements. Some neighbors fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats. That was when Sarah Jenkins, my next door neighbor, stood up. Karen, isn't this a bit extreme? They're just normal cars in a normal driveway. Karen's face hardened as she snapped, "You're out of order, you." Having been acknowledged by the chair, I sat back, while Karen's husband, Bob, began distributing copies of a new proposed bylaw, one which would restrict every household to 2 autos and necessitate garage parking. Only the foolishness of it all nearly caused a laugh. Nearly will now be voting on the new auto restrictions and fee increase. Karen stated not bothering to permit discussion. All in favor. That was my signal. I slowly rose from my seat, straightening my tie. "Point of order, Madam President." Karen's eyes grew narrow as she peered at me over her reading glasses. "You're not known, Mr. Thompson, really," I said, pulling out my own folder under HOA bylaw section 73. "Any property owner may call up a point of order on voting procedures." There was complete silence in the room. I could see Karen's neatly manicured nails tighten around the podium. "Before we can vote, I think it's worth having another look at the HOA's current property ownership composition." I began to make my way towards the front of the room, my shoes clattering on the linoleum floor. "You see, in the last 5 years, Sunrise Properties has been purchasing houses in this complex." Karen's face began to pale as I drew out a big property map. "And as CEO of Sunrise Properties, I thought it could interest all of you to know precisely who owns the most of this HOA." I hesitated, making eye contact with each board member. "But maybe we should come back to that after we go over these suspicious surveillance tactics you've been engaging." The room came alive in murmurs. Out of my peripheral vision, I could see phones appearing, neighbors videoing every second. Karen's hand shook as she grabbed her water bottle, spilling over her beloved gavel in the process. And that's when Bob rushed to the podium, whispering in Karen's ear. Her eyes grew wide as she finally caught on who she'd been trifling with all this. While the meeting room went quiet, as I stood, I was pounding my heart, but my voice never wavered. Karen's condescending smile began to slide as I opened up my leather briefcase. "Before we vote on these new fees," I said, "I have something grateful to share with all of you." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick pile of property deeds, spreading them out one by one on the table. Each sheet reflected another part of my secret scheme, falling into place. The room hummed with whispers as I aligned them in orderly rows. For the last 5 years, I've seen this HOA board turn a blind eye to serious repair problems, while hassling good neighbors over small stuff. I've seen Karen here WR up Mrs. Johnson, who's 82 years old, for having a flower pot that was 1 and 2 tall. Meanwhile, Susan's friend Karen's bright purple fence somewhere never received one warning. Karen's face read, "That's not true. I enforce all rules equally." She grabbed her water bottle, but it was shaking so hard she spilled some on her designer blouse. I pulled up photos on meeting room's large screen. Here's Karen taking measurements of my grass at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, when the security camera images were clear as day, a few gasped, and here she is disregarding the Thompsons' offenses entirely after they retained her son's landscaping business. More hushed tones filled the room. I could notice others beginning to nod, recalling their own encounters with Karen's discriminatory enforcement. But the most fascinating thing that I learned, I said, taking up the pile of deeds, is that through my company, Sunrise Properties, I now have 67% of the residences in this complex. I stopped as the significance dipped into it, making me the majority shareholder. The HOA itself, Karen sprang up, knocking her chair over. "You can't do that. It's against the rules." Her voice had squeaked into high gear. I smiled serenely. "Actually, I had 3 separate law firms look at everything. It's all legal." I drew out another folder. "I also have signed complaints from 32 residents regarding harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious fees." The room burst into chaos. Mrs. Johnson rose up, her voice shaking with emotion. "Last winter, did they fine me $200 for not shoveling my sidewalk quickly enough? I ended up in a hospital with pneumonia." Others got involved, telling their stories. Karen attempted to regain control, banging her gavel. But no one was listening to her any longer. I decided to dissolve the existing board. I declared we will have new elections with term limits and straightforward rules regarding conflict of interest. No more 3 a.m. grass, not more than selective enforcement. Bob Chin of 2 doors down stood up. I seconded that motion. Quickly, hands were rising all over the room. Karen grabbed her designer handbag and began for the door. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Actually, what I said, still calm by HOA bylaws section 7. 3, you require a majority vote to adjourn. And I don't believe you have that anymore. I waved at the deeds on the table. "We're just beginning." She stiffened with her hand on the door handle, realizing her authority slipping from her grasp. 20 years of dominating the neighborhood with an iron fist were drawing to a close now. I said, opening another folder. "Let's discuss those enigmatic pool renovation charges of last summer, the ones in which $50,000 vanished. But the pool never was repaired. I have some fascinating bank records too." Share. Karen leaned against the wall, her face white. She hadn't realized yet, but a local TV news van had just arrived in the parking lot. I'd invited them to report on our neighborhood reorganization. Meeting the next few hours would bring a permanent change to our neighborhood. But first, we had decades of Karen's secrets to unravel, and I had every last receipt. My meticulous planning was at last paying off, and the best was yet to come. I arrived at my lawyer's office on Monday, grieving to discover 20 irate voicemails from Karen. She'd found my company's property records over the weekend and was threatening to sue me for secretly attempting to acquire control of the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She'd finally revealed her true colors. But Karen wasn't merely angry. She was terrified. That evening, she went door to door, spreading rumors that I was going to convert our idyllic suburb into a parking lot for my collection of cars. Some neighbor actually believed her, especially after she produced fake document purporting I had ties to a suspicious development company. I knew I had to move quickly. My security cameras caught Karen breaking onto my property at midnight, taking close-up shots of license plates of my car the day after she sued me, alleging I had violated HOA rules by purchasing properties under my company. She even attempted to obtain an emergency court order freezing my voting privileges on the HOA. That's when my months of planning paid off. My attorney unveiled our secret weapon, a chronicle of each HOA meeting for the last 5 years. We had videos with Karen giving her friends transmits or trespasses while sternly convicting others. We had duplicates of checks which indicated she'd spent HOA money to renovate her own patio good. As any, we had emails in which she boasted of using her authority to keep unwanted people out of the community. The judge's eyes widened. With every bit of evidence, Karen blushed when we presented timestamp video of her measuring my GRA grass with a ruler at 3 a.m., photographing my teenage daughter's vehicle, and putting threatening messages on my neighbor doors. Her attorney began sweating when we produced evidence that she altered HOA records in an attempt to conceal her friend's unpaid assessments. But the bombshell trial came later, when 3 previous board members emerged. They gave testimony of how Karen had abused them into passing unjust rules, confessed to unfairly targeting certain homeowners she disliked, and even boasted of using HOA fines to pay for her annual vacations in Hawaii. The courtroom became very silent when we displayed Karen's social media posts ridiculing elderly residents who were unable to pay HOA fees. There she was tweeting poolside pictures from Maui with a header, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for paying for this holiday. Keep those infractions rolling." Karen attempted to justify herself, stating that she was doing her job. But then we played the tape from last month's HOA meeting where she'd yelled at Mrs. Johnson, our 75-year-old neighbor for having a bird feeder too in too low. That's when Karen and lost it. Finally, she leaped from her chair, shaking her finger at me. He's attempting to ruin our ideal neighborhood. She yelled, "Do you know who types of people are going to move in? If we don't have strong rules, he probably wants to make this one of those complexes where they can park wherever they choose." The judge had heard enough. Not only did he dismiss Karen's lawsuit, but he ordered a complete audit of the HOA's finances as we were. Leaving the courthouse, my phone began buzzing with texts from neighbors. They'd all gotten a mass email from Karen announcing her sudden resignation from the board, alleging that she was being pushed out by big money interests. I saw her storm to her car, already furiously typing on her phone. I knew this was far from over. Karen still had her loyal followers in the neighborhood, and she wasn't a person to concede defeat easily. But for the meantime, I had what I needed: evidence that our HOA president had been misusing her position for years and the legal right to bring real changes. The morning of the last court hearing began with a surprise. Karen had sent a whole army of news van to my house. She'd hoped public pressure would get me to back down, but she'd just given me the perfect platform. I straightened my tie, took my documents, and walked straight up to reporters with a smile. "Good morning, all. I'm James Thompson, and I'd be happy to show you something interesting about our HOA's financial records." I brought out the color-coded spreadsheets my accountant had laid out, revealing years of suspicious fees that always seemed to end up in projects that proved useful to Karen's best friends. The reporter's eyes widened as I continued to explain how Karen had overcharged single parents more violation fees than her golf friends. One reporter gasped upon me, presenting security footage of Karen taking measurements on my lawn at 3 a.m. while her own lawn broke every regulation in the book. Within the courthouse, Karen sat alongside her high-priced attorney, sporting her signature imitation pearl necklace and a smug grin. That grin disappeared when our attorney began to present evidence. We exhibited pictures of Karen's own home, breaking rules, her bright purple mailbox, her 4 cars parked on the street belonging to her son, and her overgrown garden. The judge leaned in when we broke Karen's secret Facebook group in which she boasted of targeting certain families. "Let's see how long the Thompsons last with these new fees." She'd written, "Maybe they'll finally move and sell to someone more appropriate." Karen leapt to object, but froze cold when we played a recording from last week's pool party. Her voice rang clear through the courtroom. "Of course, I make up infractions. How else do we maintain authority over who resides here?" The judge's gavel came down strongly. Not just was Karen taken off the HOA board, but she was forced to repay all unjust assessments. She collected the expression on her face when she heard the figure 1478.92 was greater than any revenge I might have schemed. I utilized my majority ownership to establish a new HOA board with a twist. We voted 5 residents representing various areas of the neighborhood, including Mrs. Rodriguez, who Karen had attempted to track down for cooking ethnic cuisine, and Mr. Chun, whose lovely garden Karen described as too exotic. The changes were immediate. Kids could play basketball in their front yards. Gardens could bear vegetables, not flowers only. And yes, families could have more than 2 cars, provided they could fit in their own space. 3 weeks later, I saw from my window as Karen's moving truck drove up. She'd written a last letter to everyone announcing she was moving to an improved neighborhood with greater standards. No one missed how her new HOA's parking violation was taped to her windshield as she drove off. My daughter parked her vehicle in our drive that night, right next to my work vehicle and my wife's SUV. I erected a little sign we'd all agreed upon: "Welcome to Thompson Hills, where good neighbors create good neighborhoods." The following morning, I received an unplanned phone call. A TV producer had viewed the news reports and wished to create a documentary about how we revitalized our HOA. As I gazed out at children playing in their yards and neighbors talking over garden fences, I smiled, thinking about Karen seeing it from her new home with its 1-car garage rule to highlight our property values, appreciated 15% in the first month since Karen departed. Turns out folks actually do like living in a district where they're respected rather than ruled over. Some of Karen's former friends came by to apologize, confessing they'd merely been afraid of being her next target. We still maintain an HOA, but it serves to protect the community rather than monitor it. Each month, we utilize the charges for something that truly counts: making the playground, repairing the pool, assisting elderly residents in taking care of their homes. We even planted a community garden in the area where Karen used to pose her yard file photos. As I put away the final of the court papers, my phone vibrates with a text message. It's from Karen's new neighborhood watch organization. They want to know how to handle their own power. Hungry HOA president. I relax in my chair, contemplating the fact that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all it's teaching others how to stand up to themselves.